Hello. Tisha B'Av is the saddest day on the Jewish calendar. A long list of catastrophes befell the Jews on that day, the 9th of Av. The fact that they all happened on that day is either accidental or intentional, but enough to make us dread the coming of that day every year. The Mishnah, written 2,000 years ago, recalls 5 tragedies that occurred on Tisha B'Av up to that time. First, the spies Moses sent to scout the Promised Land brought back a largely negative report which demoralized the Israelites. Then the Babylonians destroyed the first temple in 586 BCE. Then the Romans destroyed the second temple in 70 CE. Then Bar Kokhba failed in his revolt against Rome in 135 CE when he was killed at Betar. Finally, Jerusalem was razed a year later and the diaspora began. Then in the last 2,000 years, many catastrophes also happened on Tisha B'Av. In 1095, the Pope began the Crusades to wrest the Holy Land from the Muslims. But on the way there, the Crusaders slaughtered 30 to 50% of the Jews of Europe. In 1242, 24 cartloads of handwritten Talmuds were burned in Paris. In 1290, the decree expelling all Jews from England was signed. In 1306, the decree expelling all Jews from France was signed. In 1492, the decree expelling all Jews from Spain, including my own ancestors, was signed. In 1626, Shabbatai Tzvi was born. He was a false messiah, and after his apostasy to Islam, he dashed the hopes of millions of Jews, 1/3 of the total, and severely disrupted their lives. In 1914, World War I began. It led to World War II and the death of 6 million Jews in the Holocaust. It also facilitated the Communist Revolution, spelling 70 years of darkness for Soviet Jews. In 1941, the Nazis ordered the final solution, the Holocaust. To console us, the Talmud says that the Messiah will be born on Tisha B'Av. We ask, is all this suffering necessary in the scheme of things? Why did these calamities happen to us? Why do bad things happen to people who do not appear to deserve them? This line of inquiry carries a fancy name. It's called theodicy, which literally means God's justice. Throughout our history, we cried out loud the words of the psalmist, Eli, Eli, lama azavtani? My God, why have you abandoned me? Why are you so far from delivering me and from my anguished roaring? First, note that God frequently causes suffering as retribution for wrongdoing. For example, the expulsion from the Garden of Eden for eating the forbidden fruit, the flood in Noah's day for, quote, great wickedness, corruption, and evil, the multiplicity of languages on earth for the Tower of Babel, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah for, quote, wickedness and sin, turning Lot's wife into a pillar of salt for looking back, the earth swallowing up Korach and his followers for rebellion against Moses, exile and destruction of the first temple for idolatry, adultery, and murder, and of the second temple for senseless hatred, etc. We can understand this suffering. But what about the suffering that is not punishment? Are there advantages to suffering? A commentator said that suffering breaks our attachment to this world and makes people more spiritually inclined. There are many popular sayings that extol the importance of suffering. All births are painful. All beginnings are hard. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, etc. Are these healthy attitudes? Yes, when they make it easier for us to accept what we cannot change and fuel hope that it would lead to something good. Unlike other religions, Judaism does not welcome suffering per se, does not view it as positive. The Talmud records 3 variations of this conversation. Quote, Rabbi Hiya bar Abba fell ill. Rabbi Yochanan went to visit him and said to him, Is your suffering dear to you? Rabbi Hiya said to him, I welcome neither this suffering nor its reward. In other words, I don't want the suffering, even if there is a reward that will come after it. The story continues. Rabbi Yochanan said to him, give me your hands. Rabbi Hiya bar Abba did so, and Rabbi Yochanan restored him to health. So before applying faith healing, Rabbi Yochanan had to make sure the patient wanted to recover. If not, faith healing will not work. He did not assume the desire for recovery was automatic. Yet, whether we welcome suffering or not, our tradition says that it is necessary. The Talmud says, quote, it was taught in a Baraita, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai says, the Holy One, blessed be He, gave Israel 3 precious gifts, all of which were given only by means of suffering: the Torah, the land of Israel, and the world to come. Let's consider the first one, the gift of Torah, which grew out of the bitter experience of slavery in Egypt. Why the slavery? We don't understand it. The Israelites had done nothing to deserve it. In the Torah, God simply makes a terse prediction to Abraham. Quote, know for certain that your offspring will be strangers in a strange land and will be enslaved and afflicted for 400 years. But know with equal certainty that I will judge the nation that enslaved them, and that afterwards they will leave with great substance. Sure enough, Abraham's grandson Jacob and his clan of 70, all the Jews of the time, went to Egypt to escape a famine invited by Pharaoh through Jacob's son Joseph. But the next Pharaoh enslaved them for 210 years. Why this unspeakable suffering? Evidently, God thought slavery was necessary for his plan. But why? And why for so long? Let's explore some possible answers. First, we were enslaved for our protection. In the land of Israel, Jacob's small clan was an easy target for its neighbors. In Egypt, a superpower protected us, albeit to exploit us. Second, slavery allowed us to build up our numbers in safety. If 210 years equal 10 generations, and if numbers double with each generation, assuming 4 children per couple, the original number would increase 1,000-fold. 2 to the 10 is 1,024. To get to the 3 million people in the Talmud speculates were at Sinai for the giving of the Torah, we have to assume 6 children per couple, which is not unreasonable for the time. Third, slavery allowed us to build up our identity and community spirit. We were all in the same boat and followed the same customs. The Midrash says that the Jews deserved redemption from Egypt because they kept their distinct names, dress, and language. Fourth, slavery created a scenario that allowed God to show the Jews and the whole world who was in charge, with miracles and wonders that make a big impression. God did so when he freed the Jews. Seventh, the gratitude we felt when we were liberated made it easier for us to accept the Torah. Indeed, the first thing God said at Sinai was, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. The slave mentality made it easier for us to accept the Torah. Indeed, after being a slave for so many generations, the first instinctive response when given a command is to say, yes, sir. However, once we accepted the Torah, the slave mentality became a burden. So God waited until the generation of the Exodus died out in the desert before letting us into the promised land. In fact, the Maharal went so far as to say that Pesach is not the time of true freedom, but rather the time when we change master from Pharaoh to God. However, it must be pointed out that the first slavery was for the benefit of the master, while the so-called second slavery was for our own benefit. So these 8 reasons allow us to conclude that even though we did not deserve slavery in Egypt, ultimately it was all God's plan for our own good. Another thought advanced by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs is that suffering makes us appreciate what we have. He says, what we have and then lose, we do not take for granted. Israel had to lose its freedom before it could cherish it. So the Israelites appreciated their freedom more when they regained it after having lost it while being slaves in Egypt. Moses rebukes God, as it were, for predicting suffering to the people. In the Torah, we read this exchange between God and Moses at the burning bush. Quote, Moses said, "When I come to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' what shall I say to them?" And God said to Moses, "Ehyeh asher ehyeh, I will be what I will be." Then God continued, "Thus you shall say to the Israelite, 'Ehyeh, I will be, sent me to you.'" The Talmud comments, quote, "The Holy One, blessed be He, told Moses to go and tell Israel, 'My name is I will be what I will be,' meaning I will be with them in this enslavement, just as I will be with them in other enslavements in the future." Moses said before him, "Master of the universe, they have enough trouble now. There's no need to tell them about future suffering. Let it come at its appointed time." The Holy One, blessed be He, agreed and said to Moses, "Go and tell Israel only that I will be has sent me to you." This leads us to wonder, is all suffering for some greater good, one that we usually don't understand? A rabbi in the Talmud used to say, in spite of all the terrible things that happened to him, Gam zu letovah, this too is for the good. Perhaps God knows that the afterlife is not so bad, so is not as worried as we are when people die. In discussing the story of Purim, the Talmud makes a remarkable point. Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana said, when King Ahasuerus approved Haman's proposal to kill all the Jews, he was more effective than the 48 prophets and 7 prophetesses who prophesied on behalf of the Jewish people. Indeed, they were all unable to return the Jewish people to the right way, but the king's agreement to genocide returned them to the right way. So Haman did more for the Jews spiritually than all the prophets in the Bible. The prophets told the Jews to repent and reform, and most Jews didn't listen. But Ahasuerus ordered all Jews killed, and all of a sudden the Jews went back to their traditions. The message is clear. Antisemitism can preserve Judaism. There is historical evidence. After the Exodus, a lot of Jews lapsed into idolatry and clung to it tenaciously and enthusiastically for 1,000 years. Then after the exile in Babylonia, idolatry disappeared from Judaism, suddenly and completely, and has remained absent for the next 2,500 years to this day. What happens? Here's my own explanation. During the 1,000 years of idolatry, the Jews were essentially free and masters of their own house. They felt they could indulge in whatever happened to them, whatever appealed to them, as free people do. Many found idolatrous rites colorful and attractive and felt free to engage in them. But for the next 2,500 years, the Jews were subjugated and persecuted by the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Christians, the Muslims, etc. They felt they had to keep their own traditions and not adopt the practices of their overlords as an act of rebellion. They were even willing to die rather than be forced to indulge in idolatry or reject their traditions. The story of Hanukkah is a perfect example. This point has been made repeatedly in modern times also. Here are some examples. Spinoza said that only thanks to anti-Semitism do the Jews continue to exist as a separate people. Rabbi Hirsch said that anti-Semitism is the tool through which the God of Israel, preserves his people. Freud said, "My language is German. My culture, my attainments are German. I consider myself German intellectually. Until I noticed the growth of anti-Semitic prejudice in Germany and German Austria. Since that time, I prefer to call myself a Jew." Einstein wrote, "My relationship to the Jewish people has become my strongest human bond ever since I became fully aware of our precarious situation among the nations of the world." Dershowitz said that the absence of anti-Semitism in the US spells doom for American Jews. The Jewish bottom line is, yes, we can sometimes recognize objectively that suffering is necessary. Still, we do not welcome it regardless of the benefits it brings. Have a meaningful fast, and may Tisha B'Av never bring us another catastrophe.